Hello, everyone. My name's Matthew Bamberg, and I'm a certified core adjunct professor at National University. And I'm going to explain to you how to unpack English language arts standard. The first thing you have to know is um, what CCSS is. That's Common Core State Standards. The ELA portion of the blue here is English language arts. It's a literacy standard. The RI stands for reading informational text, and the 3.2 is the third grade level. So what is the standard? The standard is to determine the main idea of the text, recount the key details, and explain how they support the main idea. This is an entire text. So you're going to divide it into three parts to get an objective out of it. The first part is the performance. The performance is to organize the main idea and key details. The next part of the objective are going to be the conditions. The conditions is given the reading selection. And you should always give the specific title and authors of selections in your learning maps so a substitute can follow them, or another teacher that you're teaming with can follow what your curriculum is. And then finally, there's the criterion, using a tree thinking map. A tree thinking map is a map with different lines on it, and it branches out and it looks like a tree. So here's the example objective. Organize the main idea and key details of a reading selection, give specific title and author of selection, and explain how each detail supports the main idea using a tree thinking map. And then I always suggest writing the learning target on the board for students in first person so that the students are reading. I can organize the main idea and key details of a reading selection and with the specific title and the author of the selection, and explain how each detail supports the main idea using a tree thinking map. So let's unpack the standards so you can go ahead and write your learning map. The first thing you want to think about is prior knowledge. The three things to think about at the beginning of the lesson are that you want to stimulate prior knowledge, you want to explain the why of the lesson, and you want to relate the concept to real life. Say, if you're reading a selection about the Titanic, you want to let students know the story of the Titanic and how it sank in 1912, and how bacteria has eaten at the core of the ship, so it makes it very fragile to even try to lift it from 2.5 miles down in the ocean. The next thing is the prior knowledge that students should know. And supposedly you would have already taught about a paragraph, writing a paragraph, more specifically, writing the topic sentence and the supporting details, and then put the paragraph in, say, a web graphic organizer or a tree thinking map. And relating the lesson to real life, if you're considering a whole article, you can consider a newspaper article. And newspaper articles are written so that the readers can identify the who, what, when, where, why, and how of the article, and then the other information comes afterwards. So if students are reading a newspaper article and filling out a thinking map for a newspaper article, you want to think of the supporting details in terms of the who, what, when, where, why, and how. The next thing for unpacking the standards are the nouns. You want to teach the students what the nouns are in the standard. So what are nouns? Nouns are the subjects or objects of verbs. You want to consider front-loading or previewing the nouns with ELs before the lesson, ELs being the English learners of the class. And you want to provide repetition of the words by repeating frequently during the lesson. So what are the nouns? The nouns are main idea, thinking map, tree map, key details, informational text, nonfiction, fiction. You want to determine what kind of selection the students are going to read, or that you're going to read to them, or that they're going to read in groups. You also want to identify the vocabulary words of the section. You might do that through close reading, where students go through the reading before they read the entire selection, and circle the vocabulary words that they don't know. Next is a title, and most important is the author. You want to introduce students to the concept of the author so they get familiar with who wrote the book and realize that it's a real person who put the effort into writing the reading selection they're reading. Next comes the verbs, the do part. They're usually action words from the depth of knowledge chart or Bloom's taxonomy. You want to front load these verbs just as you did the nouns. You want to provide repetition for the verbs as you teach the lesson. The verbs of the standards are determine, recount, organize, explain, and support. Finally, you want to consider the materials, the tools, the strategies, and the questions when unpacking the standards. The materials are the items the students are going to use in the lesson and the items that you are going to use in the lesson. The materials also include any technology that you may use in the lesson. You might be using Google Docs for students to fill out a pre-made form that they'll fill out in Google Classroom. Next, you want to always introduce the title and the author of the selection and show them the cover of the book before you read the book to them or before they read it to themselves or they read it in a group. And then you want to speculate as to why the author wrote the selection. For instance, in the Titanic, he may have been a scientist who investigated the underwater remains of the ship. So the materials for this lesson basically are the tree thinking map. The questions that you want to ask are, what is the main idea? The questions that you want to ask and then have students answer. What are the key details? What is an example of the main idea from the reading selection? What are some examples of key details from the reading selection? And what is a tree thinking map? And that's how you unpack a standard. The reason why you want to unpack a standard is so that you can write your learning map. And I want to wish you happy unpacking of standards. And that's it for this video. And I want to thank you for joining me.